And we are back with Boyd Matheson. Boyd, we have now talked about Mitt Romney and Herman Cain. Next, Rick Perry.
All right, Governor Perry. I think from a positive standpoint, in terms of his entrance onto the scene, I think they did a very nice job early on with what I think their campaign probably does best, which is the politics of persona. They were able to frame Governor Perry as kind of a bigger-than-life, almost Ronald Reagan-esque kind of figure, big in stature, kind of the look and feel of success and positive governing and Texas and all of those kinds of things, and really framed it as he's been successful in Texas, an important state, all of those kinds of things, and really trying to frame it as success begets success, that he's done it before, and that's why he'll do it again. He's been able to do it before, and that he has the ability to surround himself with people who can sustain that and keep that rolling. But very heavy, very, very heavy on image. If you look at most of the things they did early on after they made their announcement, which announcement in and of itself was all about the person much more than the politics. It was he was going to be the savior of the Republican Party, that this group of candidates that no one was really gelling around or had a lot of passion about, that suddenly he was going to do it. And so in some ways, I think they've reaped what they sowed, in that they created about personality and very, very tiny sound bites instead of real substance in terms of a path. And so while I think they did that very well early, as you can see, they were not able to translate that into any kind of movement. So a lot of motion early on, a lot of photo ops. And again, those things are important. They're part of the narrative and telling the story. But they never really made the transition until I think it was too late. I think they could have even positioned better going into debates, knowing his style, knowing how he speaks and communicates. I think they could have framed how he would do in debates very differently, so that he didn't come across as he did, as disinterested and not energetic and not passionate and
even arrogant. He has said some things that just the backlash was huge, and he seems startled that people are upset by what he says. So he seems to shoot off at the mouth without stopping to think before he speaks at times, and that is costing him dearly, in my opinion.
I completely agree, Candace, and I think it's one of those things that candidates on a national stage learn too late, and that is dealing with your local media is very different than dealing with the national media. And even, as governor of Texas, he's going to deal with a pretty big and broad media presence down there, but they're still all within the state of Texas. And even, going on some national things here and there, it's very different when your focus is on your local area. Bobby Jindal's a good example of that. He can go on any national program and do very well because he's always focused on how it relates to Louisiana. But you transition that, and suddenly everything changes, and you don't have those people from the local newspaper or the local news station who will probably be a little more forgiving and a little more understanding, or frame it in a little different way for the people of the state. Suddenly you're dealing with a national correspondent who really doesn't care what's going on in Texas. And I think that has surprised Governor Perry to a large degree, that he is not the authority on everything. It's not his way or the highway. He has to. People are going to ask hard questions, and he can't be offended that they ask.
And he really doesn't seem to like when he is questioned.
Definitely not.
Yeah, he has got to get over that, because on the national stage, in a presidential campaign, he's going to be nothing but questioned on everything he says and does. And if he doesn't snap out of it, he's going to lose altogether before he even gets a chance to begin winning.
Absolutely. And some of his early debate performances actually reminded me of Al Gore. You remember
Yeah.
his Darth Vader breathing and just how agitated he was that he was getting questioned or that people were framing things different. And he had such a hard time just being open to that as part of the deal and part of the game that it was almost too late. The persona got cast.
Yeah, for the man who invented the internet, it's just a little hard to get out of the dungeon and get out in the public. Sorry about that. I couldn't resist. That was one of the brighter moments of that campaign.
Indeed. That's right.
Oh, my gosh. Okay, let's move on to Rick Santorum.
Now, Senator Santorum is, I actually really like the senator. I had an opportunity to sit down with him once back in D.C., and he's a very likable guy. I think above all, he does have the fact that he believes that there is such a thing as truth, that principles matter, and that it's not about situational ethics or situational leadership or who you're talking to today that should drive your messaging. And so I think he has done a decent job of getting that out. I think he's starting to find his footing a little bit from a message standpoint. I think if you went to Iowa and talked to people, because he's been camped out there, and that's an important part of his strategy. He's not going to win it on a national stage. He is not going to drive big fundraising numbers. He's not that kind of personality. But on the stump with people in their homes and so on, he's very, very good and really does have the especially the social conservative types of experience and commitments that I think are very appealing. I think the last debate was a little bit of a stumble for him in that in trying to get some oxygen on the stage and to get a little spotlight, I think he had to reach, and I think you could sense that he wasn't really comfortable in the reach, because I really don't think that's who he is. I don't think that's the way he governed as a senator. I don't think that's the way he represented the people of Pennsylvania. And so it was not congruent, and that came across.
It did.
I think
it really did.
I think he has come across some messaging that I think if his team really jumps on, they can frame it as a consistent conservative. I think that's an interesting message that could play out very well in Iowa and South Carolina, and even in Florida and Nevada, that there are some things that you should trust, and here's why. And I think the more he talks about principles, the more he tries to frame himself as someone who just lives those principles. I think he struggles a little bit in trying to differentiate himself, and I think his people have him focused too much on races in Pennsylvania against liberals and incumbents, and while those things are interesting, I really don't think they're that important. I think what people want to know is, who are you, what do you stand for, and what are you going to do as president? And I think he can do that. I think he can do it much better. But when he's trying, it's the old saying: if you have to declare it, you ain't it. It's like my teenagers when they say, I'm an adult now. When they're declaring they're an adult, it's usually because they're about to do a very childish thing. And so if you have to declare it, you're probably not it. And so I would like to see Senator Santorum talk about those principles, talk about some of those things that drive who he is. He has a compelling story. I don't think they've told it well. I think he has done some good things when he was a senator. He did some great things in the state of Pennsylvania. In some pretty tough races, but it's not about the races, it's about the principles. Because the one thing with Americans and conservatives in particular is when they hear those principles, they ring true. And then you don't have to say anything else. You don't have to thump your chest. You don't have to point out everyone else's faults or have a nitpicky fight with someone. You just stand above it and you stand on principle, and that's really the best way to stand out and differentiate.
Yeah, I'm afraid that he is just not well enough known. Mitt Romney ran into that in the last election, and he spent the last 3 years getting out there, really branding himself, supporting conservatives. Not all. There were some people he supported that weren't conservative. I'll say that right off the bat. But as you and I both know,
yes.
And so he got out there and did what Ronald Reagan did: got his face in front of the public and kept it there. Santorum, I don't believe, is going to be able to win this nomination because he's just simply not well enough known, and it may be because he doesn't have enough money. But he's going to have to put in the time like Mitt Romney did, in my opinion, and get out there in front of the public and make himself a player on the national scene, because we have so many strong conservatives running in this election that if you don't have the money and you don't have the recognition, you're not going to be able to win.
It is. It's tough, and he's clearly anchored his hopes on this in getting some momentum coming out of Iowa. We saw it last round with Huckabee. He was able to kind of capture lightning in a bottle in Iowa, but was never able to really translate that or transpose that onto a national stage or into significant fundraising or organization. And I think that will be Santorum's biggest challenge is trying to parlay that into something else.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you completely. I like the senator, and as you said, he's done a lot of good stuff, and so I think, in all honesty, whoever wins this nomination, I believe they will beat Barack Obama if they do it, if they run their campaigns properly. I would like to see all these people in the cabinet, every single one of them. Okay, Michelle Bachmann.
Michelle Bachmann. Now, again, a very interesting path. She jumped on stage. She had that initial momentum, kind of catapulted to the front of the line and had some of the recognition and so on going. But very similar to Herman Cain and even Governor Perry, being able to get the structure and the discipline in place has proved to be pretty elusive to her. I think, again, what she did well early, and she's wonderful on the stump. She's wonderful, with people. She understands the Tea Party movement and element there. And so I think they did that fairly well early. But again, they weren't able to parlay it or to transform it into sustained momentum. And that requires not just a good foundation, but a support structure that can sustain it over time. I think some of her biggest challenges, particularly as you look at the debates and the opportunities to build some national momentum, and again, the national polls only matter in that they create momentum and help fundraising and structure. What she hasn't done in the debates is she has not been able to get out of the stump mode and into a debate mode. For example, in every debate, she has repeated her stump line of making Barack Obama a one-term president. And you'll notice from a body language and vocal standpoint, she delivers it as if she were on the stump, screaming at a bunch of fans who were already cheering anyway. And so, unfortunately, her debate performance has really boiled down to a lot of cliches and a lot of one-liners that, again, work well on the stump, but they just don't come across as thoughtful and credible. I think she also has to be very careful. She's actually falling into some of the mistakes that actually both Hillary Clinton and Sarah Palin, grouping those two together is always fun,
yes.
that they fell into, and that is, I think, particularly, when people move up the pitch scale, you tend to lose credibility. And Hillary ran into this problem horribly early on.
She did. She made one huge mistake after another.
And she was very shrill, and it was very harsh and very pitchy, and it lost a lot of credibility. If you remember from the last CNN debate, there were several moments where Congresswoman Bachmann was really in a very high-pitched voice, kind of screaming for the attention of the moderator and trying to get Anderson Cooper to call on her, and then kind of rattling off or screaming a one-liner from the stump. And I think she loses a lot of credibility there. And that's an interesting thing for people to watch in debates. Look where tone of voice and pitch go, especially as the heat goes up or they're trying to emphasize a point. The higher you go in that pitch range, the harder it is to be really credible. And so learning some voice coaching, I think, would do her wonders. And also just getting out of she's trying to make sound bites instead of trying to show the substance that she obviously gets. And whether it's, what happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas this time. They're just, it's a little light. I think people have been disappointed that she hasn't shown her substance. And I think that's her campaign's biggest challenge right now is they have to prove that she's not just a stumper and a flamethrower of sound bites, that she's got substance behind her, that she's got a plan, that she has a vision for governing, not just campaigning, but governing, that will really make a difference for the country.
Well, and I as I have listened to her, she makes some comments that are just completely out in left field. And it makes you wonder, for me, and I really like Michelle Bachmann, for me, it has made me stand back and think if that is the comment she is going to make on a national stage when the nation's fate is waiting on who emerges as our next president, it makes me wonder if she has the strength to do it. Do you think she has the strength to actually be president of the United States? Because she has been reduced to sound bites. She has been reduced to off-the-cuff remarks that are coming back to haunt her because of what she's saying. She seems to speak before she thinks.
Yes, and being fast and loose, again, if you've got a red meat, already supportive crowd, you can get away with that. But again, I think she has to prove that she's a little more thoughtful. And I think one thing that not only applies to Michelle Bachmann, but to all the candidates, is how willing they are to be a little vulnerable. They get so scripted, and they're so worried about having the perfect answer for every question. Learning to be a little vulnerable and not lead with an outlandish statement that you may not even have the facts right, as opposed to a more thoughtful approach, and even being willing to say, I'm not sure, but we'll find out. Or that's something we've got to look at in a different way. Or I've got a group of experts that are going to advise me on X, Y, or Z, is a thing that I think the American people actually appreciate. I like to call it courageous vulnerability, and it's sorely lacking, especially in our politicians today. They think they have to have the answer for everything, and I think Michelle Bachmann in particular suffers because she tries to do that when she really ought to just step back and be a little more thoughtful.
Should, and the way that I see it is that I personally respect someone much more if they say to me, I don't know. I'm not going to address that right now till I have more information. I love that. My mother is one of the most brilliant women that I know, and I have called her over the years asking questions, and if she didn't know the answer, she would say, let me do a little research, I'll call you back tomorrow, and I'll have the answer for you. And she always did. Mm-hmm. But if she didn't know it, she didn't make it up.
Exactly.
And that's what we need from these candidates, that they don't know. They need to keep their mouths shut.
That's right. Yeah, I love the old saying that it is better to be silent and let people think you're a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt.
Yes, and I am afraid Michelle Bachmann, as much as I like her, is suffering from that.
Indeed.
and she's got to snap out of it. She's got to get some cohesiveness in her campaign. She's got to get some consistency in her campaign and really get serious, and it may be too late at this point. Okay, we are going to go to break in 5 minutes, but do we have enough time to cover Ron Paul, or should we go to Gary Johnson and cover Ron Paul on the other side?
We can, either way, we can, Gary Johnson I think will be a short one because he hasn't really moved the needle much.
Yeah, let's go with Gary Johnson and then we'll go to break.
Okay. I think he tried to take advantage of announcing early, which can be both a benefit and a weakness in that you kind of get lost in the who's really running and who's declared and how early is it too early to declare and why would you declare now? So I think they tried to capture that piece and see if they couldn't get a few sparks flying early in order to just see if they couldn't capture some segment or get a little momentum somewhere. They clearly didn't. And I think he's just kind of floundered since. I think, again, from a messaging standpoint, he really hasn't created any kind of direction or even being identifiable as a Ron Paul is with certain positions. So he's a little bit vanilla that way. Again, I think he did some unique things, but he hasn't even told that story well. And as a result, he's really not on the plus or minus scale in terms of what's happening from a pollster position and to be honest, I'm not even sure what he's doing anymore. Other than he occasionally floats up that, he was upset that he didn't get invited to a certain debate or, he's going to protest something, but really hasn't gained any traction anywhere that I'm aware of. And it really seems to be, it's almost just a passive approach to, well, if something catches or if the right moment comes along or something happens in the country, then he's going to be positioned to step forward. But playing the waiting game in a very crowded field is rarely a winning strategy.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's true, and what he has said has disturbed me. So I think he's not even really a player. But I wanted to bring him up because he has been at some of the debates and. Yes. And he did have the best line of the entire campaign, that his neighbor's two dogs. I'm sorry about that. Okay, anyway, that his neighbor's two dogs had provided more shovel-ready jobs than the Barack Obama administration had. Best line of the entire campaign so far.
Yes, a great line, but again, nothing to. And even interesting. It's very interesting, and I'm glad you actually raised that, Candace, because it shows that when you live by the soundbite, you also die by the soundbite.
You do, because that's all I know he's said. That's
right. That's right. Now, had he come in behind that great line with a jobs program or an element, it doesn't even need to be a full jobs program, just an element of what should be done, then you're able to start bolting in some of these principles that people can start to identify you by. And to me, that's a critical part of any successful campaign is what are the principles you're known for? A soundbite alone is not going to cut it. It's what you back that up with that will solidify it and bolt it into the minds of the people and the voters that can actually do you some good. But you see far too many over-scripted. They get off a great line, but that's kind of the end of it. And in a news cycle that is 24/7, you'll be lucky if the soundbite survives 24 hours. Even though you can reference it months later, if there's no way to frame it or if there is no way to move it forward, then it's really just a soundbite. And soundbites don't win elections. Substance wins elections, and you have to be able to, again, parlay it, translate it, move it forward, because, again, that's what Americans are about. How do we move forward? You can get a nice zinger off, you can get a nice line off, but if you're not taking people somewhere, you're just kind of it's a circular firing squad, and nobody wins.
I'm afraid that's true. And that's what happened to Gary Johnson. It just is not going to work out for that man. So we will take a break and come back on the other side and talk about Congressman Ron Paul and John Huntsman, Ambassador John Huntsman, our last two candidates. And then we're going to do the 1-to-1 matchup, okay?
All right. Sounds good.
All right. We'll be right back.